Welcome to Authenticate This, the cybersecurity leadership podcast for CISOs and identity leaders navigating the complex world of identity. From real-life breaches to internal missteps and everything in between, we bring you authentic stories, hard-earned lessons, and actionable insights to help you lead with confidence when chaos strikes. Our goal is to humanize identity, uncover actionable solutions, and explore the business of identity beyond the spreadsheet. This is Authenticate This, where identity meets leadership.
Hey, welcome to Authenticate This. I'm Aaron, hanging out with the great host, Tim York, and we brought a guest, a gentleman named Steve Cobb, who's coming to hang out with us. At heart, this guy, he's a total geek. We got to meet for a little bit, and we talked a lot about Star Wars. Turns out he does a ton of stuff where he's helping up the youth of doing cyber teams and competitive cyber teams across the U.S. He's an outdoorsman. He codes as a CISO. He codes in his own personal time, spends a lot of time in the lab. As I got to see the guy and meet him a little bit, I was preparing for this weekend, which we've got a family Christmas in July. And so, Steve, as the industry cyber Santa, do you have any tips for me as I approach Christmas in July with my family this weekend?
Stay cool. That's what I would say to you first and foremost. But enjoy the idea of Christmas in July. I think it's always an interesting take, especially for me being recognized as Cyber Santa in the area I live, which is in the mountains of North Carolina, the western part of the state. We have a couple of towns that do Christmas in July. And when I go visit, everybody asks me if I want to put on the Santa suit and ruin that. I don't want to take it that far. I'm comfortable with Cyber Santa, but I don't want to take it all the way where I'm dressing up as Jolly Old Nick all the time and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think, Aaron, what I would say is Christmas in July gives you the opportunity to buy some Christmas decorations at a really big discount. Hey, plan accordingly.
That's smart. Maybe we should hook you up with some sort of cyber style Santa suit.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
Maybe it's got to be a red hoodie with some white trim on it or something like that.
Oh, okay. So with all of your stuff you're doing with all these cyber teams, you are the leader of the red team, being the Santa suit. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah.
Cool.
Love it. Steve, we're gonna jump in on your origin story and a whole bunch of things. But before we do that, one of the things we like to do on this podcast is review funny articles that are identity or cybersecurity related, and where we find these articles on Reddit, it's actually a subreddit called Not the Onion. And if you're familiar with the Onion, it's a spoof article. They do funny joke articles, but the Not the Onion are real articles that you would think are jokes, but they're actually real. And I've just got the headlines. I went through the articles briefly just to read up on them. We don't need to spend too much time, but I do want to run these headlines by you and see what your thoughts are. This one's kind of scary for me. Drug cartel hacked FBI official's phone to track and kill informants. Now imagine you're a witness of a crime, or you're being interviewed by the FBI because they have information about somebody, but we don't know that FBI agent isn't going to get hacked and that data is going to get leaked. And obviously I've never been an informant for the FBI. I don't know anyone who has. However, if I was ever an informant, I would want to feel that I would be protected and be safe.
Yeah, for sure. I always, in the digital age that we live in right now, and they talk about witness protection, I always wonder at this point, how can you really guarantee witness protection in the day and age that we live in now, especially when that data has got to be disseminated in several places, not just official places, but non-official places as well. And I wonder if I was an informant, Tim, like you mentioned, and was asked to go into the witness protection program, I'm not sure I'd feel a lot safer than when I would be outside the witness protection program. In fact, I might argue that it might put a bigger target on you and make you more of a target.
That's interesting. Yeah, because before this comes from decades of movie watching, but like to me, I'm like, oh, I just shave my beard, grow my hair out, dye my hair or something. That'll help me hide. But now it's, hey, ChatGPT, could you create me like 10 different looks? If Steve Cobb was trying to go into the witness program, what would he look like? Give me some options. So like you can't even hide on a person or like on a physical level, much less where so much of your information is out there digitally.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too how much we've learned about how CIA and other covert operations were using masks and other things to hide identity and change identity, and how far along those things were. I read a story not long ago where they said that the CIA was a consultant on several Hollywood movies back in the early 90s and things, because their technology on masking identity was so far advanced that they actually used it in some Hollywood movies. And now some of that technology is available to the masses. I don't know if you've seen people with those like silk slide over masks that have a face on them already, and they really make you look, put a hoodie up around it. You really can look like someone else and be almost undetectable. It's a little funny looking, depending on lighting and how you would play it. You could essentially take on the identity of someone else pretty easily these days.
Wow. So you're saying, like, when I watched Mission Impossible
Those things are,
that's real.
those are real.
Okay.
Yeah, those are real.
I knew it. I know that was possible. I also know now that I can hang on the side of an airplane and survive. Easy.
Yeah. I don't know that I can do that. Tom Cruise did,
Okay.
but it's still pretty interesting. But
How about hanging on the side of your Christmas sleigh?
yeah, that's tough to do sometimes in and of itself.
That's actually a great segue. We had another Not the Onion article, but that's a perfect segue into another article that is a real story from dark reading where, Steve, you were actually quoted, and it was about deep fakes. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so this just happened recently, and I was asked to provide some commentary and content to the article. But if you go look at the article, and you can find it pretty much everywhere now, it's a pretty large story. Bloomberg and Forbes have done articles on it. But essentially, threat actors were using AI deepfakes to impersonate Marco Rubio and call state officials in the U.S. and foreign officials as well. And it's a interesting advancement, I think. Don't get me wrong, AI deepfakes have already been here. This is not a new revelation. I think what is new is the bold steps that you see threat actors taking, that they're going to impersonate the Secretary of State actually to foreign officials, and what the consequences or what the implications are for that. Because I think what it means is, as other threat actors look at this and see what's going on, they're obviously going to try to replicate this and use it in order to advance their own mission, whatever that may be.
Yeah. That brings us to an interesting talk track, because earlier in the podcast, earlier this year, we actually went down the path of deep fakes and culturally changing the environment in our workplace, where we give each other permission to validate and to push back on each other. And I can't remember, we were joking about it, but we were calling it the prove who you are as a leader. We were laughing because imagine if your leader jumps on a video call and says, hey, I want you to go do this, cut the check for this organization. And now culturally, if we have the ability to push back and say, Steve, are you sure? Do you have a safe word, or do you have another way to communicate with me so I can validate that it's actually you, right? And there are some leaders that are getting annoyed because, hey, everyone's pushing back and they're making sure that I am who I am when I'm asking to do things. However, from a culture standpoint, you can impact your organization just by shifting that culture, or you could go buy some technology that can help you protect yourself from deep fakes. But we argue that it's a combination of both, right? You need to change the culture and give the people ability to push back and ask questions and validate, but you also need the proper tools, because it's two things, right? Which is why this whole podcast exists, the human side of identity. And it's so interesting on the deepfake stuff, because we feel like it's real. Like I'm looking you in the eye. I feel like you're the guy I'm talking to.
100%. And we had, just for context of real world implications, just like this AI deepfake, we had in our organization at SecurityScorecard, we had, I think, 8 cases where candidates for open positions were found out to be fake candidates. They weren't the right people. When the hiring manager got on a Zoom call with somebody, things didn't line up, wasn't the same person. They didn't match the resume, several things like that. And so we're seeing there's quite a few campaigns by threat actors specifically trying to infiltrate technology companies. And it either could be that, maybe that's the most nefarious, or it could just be, we also hear about a lot of folks that are doing multiple jobs. They're using a persona to apply for multiple jobs. They're working remotely, and so they're getting paid for 4 or 5 different jobs, all using the same persona or the same person. But I think that identity piece is becoming the validation. I called in the article trust but verify. It's the idea, to your point, of both the culture changing as well as technical tools as much as you can rely on those. But I spoke about those same things from a prevention standpoint. And I've talked about this with our executive teams and other clients, peers, when we talk about it, things like a safe word or a corporate phrase, if you will, that amongst executives, that if there's engagement or communication, you can validate with an out-of-band phrase or even out-of-bound communication. So there's several tools that you can use that are separate from your corporate tools that even in today's world where we're running our corporate data and our corporate applications on our personal phones, those things have been proven to be easily infiltrated as well. But if we can use a tool or a communication that's out of band, it's not tied to any corporate identity or corporate information, then we can use that to verify, hey, did you just text me about getting some gift cards or whatever the case may be, to make sure that you are talking to truly who you think you're talking to.
Yeah. Okay. So it's really, I love that point. When you went back to the job applicants, what's interesting is everybody, not everybody, but a large majority of people are starting to figure out how to use AI to help create a resume. And so here's an example, right? 10 years ago, 15, 20, even before tech, we would have to handwrite our resumes and we would have to type them up, and it was our language. And now you can go and say, hey, I'm applying for a job in cyber. Help me write my resume to look good within cyber. And then the hiring managers are using AI to filter these job applicants, saying, looking for keywords. And so you've got two parties like, hey, these are the right people, but at the end of the day, it's not. So I argue that in the future, it could be near or far, human intelligence is going to become so much more valuable than artificial intelligence, because everybody's leveling up on artificial intelligence. Like, everybody's resumes are going to be perfect. There's no grammar errors. They're going to say the right points. And it's because they're using AI to do that. And so human intelligence is going to become so much more valuable as everybody levels up, in my opinion. And again, that could be 6 months, it could be 6 years, it could be 16 years. I don't know how long that's going to take. I don't think anybody truly does, but I do see two big divides, and human intelligence is becoming far more important than it ever has.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that aspect of intelligence and how you bring it from a human thinking, human mindset, human processing will be integral for us to move forward, especially as AI infiltrates pretty much everything that we do, all functions that we have, both at home and work. I think it'll be key for us to develop the capabilities to maintain or keep the human intelligence piece as part of the process. I think that is one thing I see as a lot of business leaders talk about, that transference or the transition to AI in companies. Hey, we need to rush into AI, and we need to really proliferate AI through our organizations. And I'm not completely arguing against that. What I am saying is we need to do it thoughtful, and it feels to me like we're sacrificing that same balancing act that we always do with convenience versus security. We're sacrificing security and for the sake of convenience, and I've never seen that come out to a good end. It's always turned out bad.
That's a really good one. I'll use that as a quote later, another quote for an article later. Yeah, it's interesting because my wife does not like using AI to write and stuff. She's also been an incredible writer. She just got her PhD, and a lot of people ask, what of this, like, how much did you use ChatGPT for this? And so she's like, none of it. And it's interesting because we talk about that human intelligence piece, and even in the interviewing process, you end up hiding skill sets, right? So some people are really good writers and are good creative thinkers and storytellers, but they're not going to necessarily be good at that, like live, right? They can't. Right. It's just not one of their skill sets. And so same thing with like encoding and development. There's a lot of those skill sets that do make them better than somebody else, but you can't find that in an interviewing process. So I will be interested to see, how do we still find those other skill sets that will remain valuable beyond just, because it's speed sometimes, right? Knowing how to work with the AI based on that human intelligence that's often hidden because AI is doing it. So that's certainly one of those things. But I think that starts with understanding humans better. And I wanted to get your take on this part, Steve, is as you're looking at cyber threats and like the Mark Rubio article too, how do you train people on identifying those humans? And the same we were talking about for interviews, right? Like the reading and writing skills, but like, how do you train people? I had a family member show me a video of a wild bear doing sign language to its cub. And she was like, holy crap, look how smart these bears are. Like it wasn't like ASL, but it was like clearly like these mannerisms and stuff. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's AI. That's not real. And there's like, but they were like, no, it's on Facebook and it's linked to this other site. Like it's real. I was like, no. And just having to walk them through, and it comes with the age of how fast we've grown, and that Facebook trustworthy or not, and what sources are. So I'm very curious of how you train against that. I've got some follow-up questions, but what are you doing in your organization or with your cyber teams and stuff like that on training against, or training humans to think about how they may be getting manipulated?
So I think this is cultural, especially I think in the United States. We've become so trustworthy of our relationships, which is a great trait. I think it's a great characteristic. But in the world of identity, and we're trying to look at cybersecurity, I always instruct people, you got to be more suspicious, right? It's okay to be suspicious. It's okay to ask questions and push back, Tim, like you mentioned. It's okay to say, hey, I want to believe you, but prove to me. Trust but verify. I think that's the first piece. It's a change of thinking, Aaron. It's a change of people questioning if what they see is real. And I think as well, we become, once again, I'll bring this back to the U.S. because we're the home of the free and land of the brave and all those things, home of the brave, land of the free, whatever it is. But anyway, we become so commodity-based, so convenience-based. So we got to have everything right now that a lot of times when we're showing pictures or videos, we automatically assume that what we're seeing is true and real. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure back in the early days of deepfakes, you probably saw there was a meme of a guy that had his camera outside of an airplane. He was a pilot in the airplane, had his camera out taking a picture. He was outside the airplane. People were like, what in the world's going on here? How's this happening? And everybody's it's not happening as AI. But people trusted that when they saw it, just like the story you told. And we have to be, I think it comes back to, like I said, culture and changing our thinking. We have to be a little more suspicious of those things we see. And in today's world, where we fast forward, back then you had to take Photoshop out and take a picture and do editing, and it took a lot of time. Now AI can generate those things in seconds. So it's proliferating more and more. And until we change that thinking, we're going to really be taken advantage of until we get to that place. So that's one thing that you think about training identity on. And I think the other thing is, we've got to start being prepared for this now. We're already behind the curve. It's already proliferated so fast that we're having this is what you see when these breaches happen, these AI deepfakes, these things are so successful right now. I see a lot of AI phishing campaigns. They're extremely successful because we haven't prepared for those things. And that's the other piece is we as a cybersecurity community and industry have to be way more prepared and get ahead of it as much as possible. We've got a bunch of ground to make up, but I think the more we focus and be intentional on getting ahead of those things that are perception based, we'll be much better off in the future.
Okay. My follow-up to that is how far and how much can we teach perception? This is going to be a question I don't know that we have an answer to, but for us to think about a little bit is, so the bear situation, trying to put it in another context, it might make sense. So say I see that same video and I'm looking at it and it's in a zoo it's a well-known zoo. I don't know, like the San Diego Zoo. And it's got somebody there that's a handler for the bears and is sitting next to them. There's a group of people watching it's clearly in a cage zoo. And it all looks real. And there's a bear talking with the human, and they're teaching them sign language. Maybe they're not doing it, but they're doing the teaching process. Maybe it's not a bear because maybe it's still a bear, but maybe we just saw another video of them doing it with a gorilla, where it seems more plausible. And then you see it with the bear. And then I'm like, hey, actually, I think that's real. I don't even think about it not being real, where in reality, maybe there's no possibility there. And so I'm faked out. And in this case, it's entertainment, so it's really not a big deal. I may tell some people, but who cares at the end of the day of this story? But the same thing is starting to happen in modern breaches, where we are manipulating human behaviors and human interests over what was happening in breaches in the past, where I was just saying, hey, let me send this email, the Prince of Kenya, right? Nigeria, right? And pulling at heartstrings a little bit, but usually like you read the email and it's terribly tight. It blatantly asks you for your credit card information. It's not trying to play a long game with you. It's like quick wins. So it's just basic scamming. Now, when we talk about organizations like in the Vegas casino breaching through Scattered Spider, as we learn more about that, it's it is grabbing human behaviors to drive a breach. And so they just called 2 a.m. for an Okta admin account saying, hey, if I don't get this, I can't get access to anything in the morning. Our company's going to go down. And then they have all the right credentials. If you look at their timeline, it didn't take long, right? They did some background research. And so they go through that timeline so fast. Anybody who's interested, go look up, just search for the Scattered Spider breach timeline, and it'll walk you through how fast they were able to do it. But they use that human piece. So in the same thing with the bear, right? The first one is, oh, look, that's entertaining. I'm a mom or a dad, and I teach my kids things too, and it's close, and it's relatable. In the same sense, I can't really blame the person who's on help desk providing this breach, this attacker admin credentials, because they know this person's job's on the line, the whole company's on the line. They believe that in their heart of hearts that if I can't do this. And so that's going to keep happening. Scattered Spider it's more than anything, is an organization of youths who understand human behavior more than they understand, or as a higher priority to understanding technology. And so do you have any ideas? Will we ever catch up where we can train? Because I'll tell you, we're still training people at organizations on don't plug in this thumb drive you found in your parking lot. We don't use thumb drives anymore, right? So is there a spot, could we catch up and teaching that like recognizing from a human perspective, or will we have to use technology to draw lines in the sand to prevent breaches?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to rely on technology to set some boundaries up. The culture has to change, as I mentioned, but we're wired that way, and especially I think in the Western countries, in the US especially, we want that closeness. That's humanism, right? We want relationship. We want to be close. We want to trust people, right? And living in a world where you're suspicious and not trusting of everyone is counterintuitive thinking for us in the US. And I think I don't think we'll ever catch up in that space, honestly. I think we have to put guidelines and barriers, technical abilities in place to help us as much as possible. But you're always going to have the human side of things play into it. And based on where we're at in our culture and what we want our lives to be outside of professional work in our organizations, in one-to-one relationships, is going to dominate and will definitely influence how we operate, how we think when we're in our professional ecosystem and we're thinking about identity. That's why I said that shift to suspicious behavior will be a challenge. And if we can get people to compartmentalize and think about it, when I'm at work, I need to trust but verify everything I need to validate. Outside of work, maybe not. The problem there is, right, you're going to see threat actors, and they already have, but they're going to be more and more crossing over into that personal side of outside. As you mentioned, the person that you knew that shows you the bear thing, that's why you have so many people. There's so many breaches and cyber crimes that happen that don't get reported because they happen to just Jim and Joe's, right? They happen to people every day. Their eBay account gets hacked. Somebody steals money from it. It's $1,000. They don't report it. And all those things add up. And that's why these threat actors just continue to scale. That's going to be the key for threat actors. We've seen it in the supply chain space because threat actors are targeting the supply chain because they can scale their attacks across thousands of organizations. You're going to see the same thing happen as they continue to spread. And AI deepfakes is one of the ways they can scale that, right? They can create one video of a persona that's trustworthy, like the Secretary of State, like Marco Rubio, and send it out to a bunch of foreign officials. And guess what? They're playing the percentages, right? They're playing the idea that I'm going to hit the lotto. We hit the number here at some point, and more than likely they do. And then they push their mission goes to the next step. I do think you're right there. You're seeing threat actors that now care more about the human behavior side of threat attacks and the identity vector, even more so than the technical side of the pieces. Because in the old days, you'd think that the hackers were these super technical people who really, don't get me wrong, there's still some folks like that. What you've seen, I think, especially from nation state actors, is they're using more folks to hack the human.
Right.
And then based on that, they get access to all the technical pieces they want. And guess what? At that point, it's really simple because we still don't do a real good job as industry of protecting our internal pieces once somebody gets in from the outside, right? It's real easy then to do persistence and lateral movement and all those things we talked about from the MITRE ATT&CK framework and how threat actors operate. Once they get that first initial piece, which has been difficult, even look at MFA and how they're gaming the MFA system with MFA fatigue and all those things is human behavior, right? They know that we as users, when we get that prompt for MFA and we just get it over and over again, we're like, what's going on? It's too slow. I keep hitting okay. And on the back end, they're stealing that code and putting it in for them. Right? That human behavior is always going to be our Achilles heel.
I think it's really cool, Steve, that you're a step or two ahead. And then the fact that you said you don't think we'll ever catch up. Our goal is just to try to stay ahead of the threat actors and shift the model as often as possible. And I'm with you. I agree completely that the human side, right? We always assume that these hackers are these brilliant, smart engineers that are just figuring out passwords on a keyboard. No, they're human. They're engineering the human side and identifying things about people they're using that information to get in. It's not what we think it is. I love that you said you're always ahead. And that brings us to a really cool kind of segue. In order to stay ahead, we've got to train and coach the next generation. And you do a lot of work with the US cyber team. You do a lot of work with coaching and mentoring. I would love to talk about what you're doing with the cyber team and your experience there.
Yeah, I was asked to join the US cyber team. It's a great organization. They run a great system. They're on season, I think, 6 now. So I haven't been involved in a few years, but I was a coach on the season 2 US cyber team. So after the first inaugural one, they asked me to come in, and I was a mentor and a coach. And it's a great program that recruits the youth. I think the age is from 12 to 24. I think with the range is really targeting folks that are leaving high school, going into college, and folks that are in college. And what I saw, which I wasn't really prepared to see, but I really was excited about it, is most college campuses have now some type of cybersecurity club on campus. And a lot of these clubs will participate in capture the flag, CTF events that they put on themselves, or they'll participate in ones that are globally. There's a lot of organizations that run these. There's companies that do this, but really it's the idea of creative problem solving and thinking about it from a cyber lens, and then solving those problems. And many times they've got to solve them as a team, right? Because they're multi-step problems that maybe somebody who has strong crypto experience has good web application penetration testing experience, somebody who has good just stenography or other. There's really interesting skills that come to play. And what the US cyber team does is have an open tournament where anybody can participate, put their names in, and based on that, they select folks who go into what's called the draft. And then from the draft, they choose the folks that are going to be on the team. And then that team travels around the US and also internationally and competes internationally against other teams throughout the country in capture the flag type of activity. Some of them are red versus blue. So in some cases, especially in the international ones, each team will get their infrastructure, a server or whatever it is to protect, as well as the other team will get the same thing. And so you're trying to break into the other team's infrastructure and hack it while they're also trying to defend it. And so it's that red versus blue war games that happen as well. So it's really cool. I think it gets people engaged. You learn a lot about where we're at for people that are coming up and interested in cybersecurity. And I think it really starts people. It's more geared now. I think the educational system, especially with these kind of add-ons, is more geared to the cybersecurity professional or practitioner than what it's been in the past. In the past, when you went through and got a computer science degree or whatever, typically that didn't necessarily mean it translated to cybersecurity skills. You had to learn those on the job and develop them. Now you're seeing some of that skill set being developed in the educational system and community colleges and in universities. And I think that's really exciting because it gives people the chance to understand the processes and the principles and get prepared for it before they go out into the workplace.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're giving back and helping that next generation. You brought up an interesting point, right? We met yesterday briefly and you told us about your origin story. You didn't start in cyber.
Yeah, that's right.
How did you get started? Let's go through that.
Yeah, and I see this play out in quite a few careers now. People transfer in, but I went to school. In high school, I wanted to be, I was pre-med. I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I went through a program where in high school, I was able to go to our regional hospital and tour it with anesthesiologists. So I got to see pre-care for patients. I got to go into the surgeries and watch the anesthesiologists do what they do. And I got post-op care with the anesthesiologists. I saw aspects of it. So saw every kind of surgery that you can imagine. It was really something at that point that I thought, you know what, this is what I really want to do. I want to do here. However, my motivations there were mainly around money. I'm just going to be honest here with it. I was really good in math and chemistry. I loved those subjects. Biology, I sucked at. Just the idea of memorizing anatomy and doing all those sorts of things, it was difficult for me. It was a little bit of an abstract science, and it was hard for me to make that transition. While I was in high school, though, I was exposed to technology quite a bit. I did gaming. I built my own computers and actually started working with a mentor there who eventually started his own computer company. And during my time, during the summers and summer back from college, I went and worked with him to actually do things like build computers and repair computers, that sort of thing. And he gave me the space, I think, to come in and really do what I like to do and actually do it in a commercial. Right. I'd always done it as a hobby, a passion. I still have that passion today. But then I was focused on, hey, they'll pay you to do this stuff. Like, this is pretty cool. I had people who love to do games. I'll never forget it. He had a customer, really a good customer, who was on cutting edge of gaming. And remember, this was way back in the early 80s, right? So think Flight Simulator, think the old NASCAR games where you actually had a shifter and a steering wheel and everything and different, all that you set up to a desktop computer. And he paid me to build him a computer that would run NASCAR simulation game that he had and run it at whatever it was at that point, 20 frames per second, way back in the day. And it was awesome. Like, it blew his mind. But yeah, those are the things that excite me, and technology excited me. And that's just what propelled. When I continued to do that in college. I left college early. I went back and finished my degree later, but I finished it in business because still at that time, computer science meant you were COBOL coding and doing things like that. And that just really didn't interest me at that point. But I left college early and started my own company doing consulting for IT and cybersecurity. And cybersecurity those days was the floppy, right? Somebody could inflect the floppy. Aaron mentioned a thumb drive. Back then it was a floppy. I don't even know what a 3.5-inch floppy disk is anymore, but
it's the save button in Microsoft Word at the top left, isn't it?
It's exactly it. Exactly it. Oh man, there's some great stories about that. But anyway, you learn those things, and that's really where I got interested. What I learned was, especially early on in those times when people had like their Microsoft Exchange servers in the very early days that were on-prem, and somebody would send the I love you virus and infect it and shut it down or whatever, that people were getting, it was affecting businesses, right? People needed help. And that kind of spurred my thinking even more. That business grew and expanded, and that's where I got my start and where I really started embracing technology and expanding what my experience and skill set was.
And then, cybersecurity as a name was not named. It was still like, information technology, and you had to do security stuff. So, and now you talk about, hey, like for the role that you were in, let's find a lucrative job style, and you found something you're passionate instead and switched. But now cybersecurity's, I wish I knew off the top of my head, but it's over $200 billion industry. It's giant and growing super fast. And there's the idea of a scarcity of jobs that are out there. And because of that's also led to, I think, a lot of cybersecurity professionals not having that. I was talking to another CISO the other day about the lack of in-depth knowledge of cybersecurity. So like on your cyber teams, you may have somebody who's focused on like cryptography, but they still understand other aspects, I'm sure, on that team and how to work together. But in a configuration-based cybersecurity world, as it is monetarily driven, that industry, vendors are creating as simple as possible platform. So it's configuration-based. People are like, I know CrowdStrike, but I don't necessarily know how infrastructure works, especially as things move more and more to the cloud. They don't understand scripting even. And so that's something I'm very interested in what you're doing with these cyber teams is how do you keep our technologists thinking about this job as lucrative, not just because right now I think it leans more and more towards technology products being lucrative and high technology leaders from like a politics management and standpoint within organizations. But those people who are going to be architects, enterprise architects, how do you keep it lucrative there? And I think that'd be fun to evangelize continuously for that. And especially from your cyber team experience. Because if we don't, what is lucrative is going to work for Scattered Spider. And they're on jail time with that. But like a lot of what you're doing is almost keeping the right people in our space to be the red team.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of thinking, at least my opinion is the more that folks that are practitioners know about the foundational pieces, networking, OS, all those sorts of things that they don't have to be experts at it. They don't have to be the SME in the room. But what I have seen as some of these cybersecurity programs are being built and laid out is sometimes they're getting directly to that end goal of being, I'll say, an endpoint analyst or a SOC analyst. And with previous life, I ran a SOC and had SOC analysts come in. And I was surprised that as I interviewed some of them, how little they knew about networking, little they knew about the IP space and how you configure IP and what that means, how little they knew about how an OS works on a machine, how little they knew about the cloud as well. And so I think foundationally, as people learn those things, or at least you plug those in where they have sessions where they learn something about networking. Now, like I said, they don't have to be a SME, but they understand where the gaps are, where the vulnerabilities exist, especially as nation state actors like the scattered spiders and others find the ways that they can poke those holes and they can try to plug themselves into those holes, the better, more rounded person we can get. I think that's one of the challenges or concerns I have is that we're building, in some cases, I think we're building some cybersecurity practitioners that are too siloed and they're not broad enough. And you don't want people to be so broad that they're stretched so thin and know everything or need to know everything. But the more that we can scatter in the ideas of what foundationally cybersecurity is, how it can be affected, the better off I think our practitioners will be. It'll make them stronger. They'll work more collaboratively. And sure, I might defer to you, Aaron, because you're the network specialist. When I say, hey, we got traffic on a firewall rule that's not being blocked for some reason. Can you go take a look at that? I can work with you because I understand the concepts, may not understand how to work everything and all the dials and the technical implications, but I do understand the foundation there. That makes our cyber teams work better. And that's what we see from the U.S. cyber team games and some programs, like I'm involved with the Metro program here in North Carolina too, where they're foundationally building those things out for people. You need to learn something about cloud. You need to learn something about networking. You need to learn something about OS. As you build those skills, it makes you much more capable and applicable to cybersecurity practitioner wherever you find yourself working one day.
That's cool. So you reminded me of earlier in my career. So on a previous podcast, I said I came straight out of lighting design and theater. So I didn't know anything. I learned Forefront Identity Manager and learned how the product worked and the sync engine worked and all that stuff. And it was time as a junior consultant to go start talking to clients. And I was so fortunate to have one of my early mentors, Matt Toddy, as I was trying to figure out, hey, look, like this is how it works. And they were like, okay, we don't know how for this application, maybe we can connect to an API. I'm like, what's an API? And Matt Toddy's like, Aaron. And he was a very passionate person. He was like, Aaron, WTF, how do you not know this? And he started. Fortunately, we had a swear jar and I made lots of money off that gentleman. But no, he walked me through all of these things I had to know about databases. He taught me scripting, or at least the importance, and guided me that the things I needed to learn, it was still my job to go figure out and learn it. But I was just fortunate to have somebody push me in that direction. And then a second person later in life, Janelle Schock, who taught me and pushed me on, wait, you don't understand what this person's job is at the company that I'm working with as a consultant, and what they care about. And so she pushed me to learn the human pieces. I guess my question to you, Steve, is for your identity team, as they're growing, or somebody trying to get into an identity team, are there certain skill sets that you would say, sure, okay, you need to know the product, Savient or Okta or SailPoint, whoever it is, right? All the 100 tools that are out there. But what are some of the other things, and it doesn't have to be identity, but some of those core skill sets, both from a technology and a like business or human element, would you say, hey, as a new person, you need to go learn these things in the space, at least at a initial level, so that you can be more impactful in your job? And your job, maybe it'll be hard early, but in 5 years, it's going to be 10 times easier because you learned it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we talk about that human side of things, there are a couple of things that I think I mention to people, especially when I'm mentoring or they're thinking about coming into the cybersecurity space, that I call out to them. One is being curious, right? The idea of being able to go creatively think about a problem and how to solve it, I think is critical for this generation as they come up, because I'm not going to rag on the current generation because I've been really impressed with a lot of things I have seen. But I think overall, in a general sense, they've been given a lot of things, the answers to before they even ask the question, they've been given the answer, right? They haven't had to think about creatively, how do I solve this problem? And that's something that I encourage people to go and think about, right? When you consider a problem, go through the steps like a 1-3-1 type of framework. Like, what's the problem? Come up with 3 options, then come up with 1 recommendation, right? Think through the whole thing, right? think through from the beginning to the end, not just I got to get to this end and I don't care. It's kind of like in school when I was coming up, I was always dinged sometimes in math because I didn't show my work, right? I could get to the solution really quickly a lot of times. As I said, I really loved math, and so I studied and could get to and I didn't show my work well enough, and teachers would always take points off for me for that. But what I learned there is showing that work helps you get the mental exercise of working mental muscles on creatively walking through problem solving and going through. That's a key thing, I think, in the cybersecurity space. You have to have that foundation because you're going to be encountering problems each and every day, and you have to understand how you're going to get to that solution. So that's one piece. The second one is I think it's really important for people to learn how to communicate. That could be via email, it could be digitally, it could be in face-to-face, it could be to both up the chain and down the chain, right? So as I try to raise up mentors, I want them to present their thoughts to people that are ahead of them up the chain and below them up the chain, because really they need to understand who their audience is, how you speak to that audience, how you translate what it is you're sharing to that audience in a proper way so that your communication doesn't go dropped on the floor. It gets consumed, that your audience can actually understand what you're saying and they can use it and apply it in the proper manner. Communication is a key piece. I think that takes our cybersecurity professionals a long way when they can communicate a threat and a risk and also what they're doing to solve that threat and risk. That'll help them in all stages of their business life, their professional life. And I would argue would help them in their personal life as well, as they learn how to communicate with others around them, regardless of kind of what the pecking order or command chain looks like. And then I think the other piece for the human side of things is really learning. I call myself a servant leader. I strive to be a servant leader. And what that looks like for me is trying to serve my team and letting them know that I'm trying to support them and help them. I've learned throughout my career that I've always come out best when I hired people around me that were smarter than I was and knew more than I was. They could help me, right? I may be gifted in leadership and other aspects of technical acumen and things like that. But when I surround myself with people that are smarter than I am, who bring something to the table, what I see is you always elevate yourself, and it means you got a raise as well, right? When you get to a place where you're the smartest person in the room, you want to get out of that room, right? Because there's nothing for you there to actually help you advance and move up. And as I tell people, is surround yourself with mentors, with peers that you can communicate with and bounce ideas off and understand that servant leadership relationship, right? It's a give and take relationship. It shouldn't be a dictator type relationship, right? You're giving and you're taking in both, and everybody's growing at the same time. And so when I talk to my teams, I want them to understand that I'm here to support them. I wouldn't ask them to do anything I wouldn't do. And in all cases, I'm going to try to do what's best for them in the workplace, in the professional career, and in their personal life as well. I want them to be successful. And so with that mindset, you start building that trust and relationship within your teams and your organizations. And it is so much more helpful when you get into the stages where there is conflict. And I encourage constructive conflict, right? Let's challenge ideas. Let's challenge each other. Let's think about why we do what we do, and let's see if we knew it better. But I also think you can't get to that spot unless there's already a foundation of trust and you understand that this is coming from the best place in order to make everybody better.
Wow, Steve, I'm going to summarize that. That was amazing. So first, be curious. Second, communication. Third, service. Help first, self second. Those are all great things. And finally, the human aspect is seeing people as people. I think those are 4 attributes that you have, Steve, that help you stand out as a leader, not just the Cyber Santa as an image, like it's an actual leader of leadership skills that people will follow. And you said one thing, and I know we're coming up on our time and we can close on this, but you said one thing that I loved is challenge thinking. And you mentioned that constructive tension is okay if you have the human aspect, right? If I see you as a human and you see me as a human and there's conflict and we have a common goal, we can come together. But the human aspect is what was so important there. So I really love that. And I think if we had to say your top 3 attributes, I would take that as a huge compliment, right? You're curious, you communicate, and people as humans. Like you said as well, this will help us in the workplace. But more importantly, this will help us in life. This will help us in relationships. Will help us with everything that we are as humans. outside of work, because for those 8 hours, and we work far more than 8 hours, but for those 8 to 12, 16 hours in a day, we're employees as part of organizations, but deep down, we're humans 24 hours a day. And if we treat each other that way, we are going to become more successful collectively. So Steve, I really appreciate you coming on today. I learned a lot. I don't want to always just call you the Cyber Santa, but I will never, ever forget the Cyber Santa and Christmas in July. So thank you for coming on our podcast.
Really fantastic. I really appreciate you all having me.
Great.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of Authenticate This, the Cybersecurity Leadership Podcast. Check out the show notes for links and resources mentioned in today's shows. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss on any future episodes.